Okay, let's get started. Again, my name is Karen Ventrilla, and I work in the Office of the Vice President of Health Sciences. I am filling in for Jill today as she had a conflict. And welcome to the panel discussion on clinical trials. As Dr. Quatrin suggested, what I'm going to do is have the panel just quickly introduce themselves, and then I do have a list of panel questions, but again, for the sake of time and given the audience, we can just kind of open it up to questions if anyone has any that they want to open up, and then I can also ask. I have the questions here that I can ask as well if we don't have a lot of people asking questions. So so Dr. Quatrin, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself first?
Sure. Let's see if I can get the video going too. Okay. My name is Teresa Quatrin. I'm a pediatric diabetes specialist, and I also work in the Dean's office as Associate Dean for Research Integration. And I've worked for many years, almost 10 years now, on the CTSI, where I co-direct the section that is called Special Populations, so populations that have been traditionally underrepresented in clinical trials and recruitment. And actually, Ashley Regling, who is a recruitment coordinator and specialist at the CTSI, is joining with me today, and was very kind to provide a lot of suggestions about topics that we always discuss in the realm of recruitment. I have been involved in clinical trials since the late 80s. And so I've seen also the changes and regulatory changes and so forth. I belong to the era where you would just scribble a signature, you wouldn't even put a date. Your coordinator would put a date. And so, yeah, it's very, very different. And my boss pretty much delegated things to me when I was still a fellow. So, very different. And that's one of the things to keep in mind with clinical trials, that it requires a lot of attention, compliance, and really dedication.
Great. Who would like to go next?
Dr. Pili is here.
Pili, yep.
Yeah, hi, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for attending this section. I'm Roberto Pili. I'm a medical oncologist, and I specialized in genitourinary malignancies, or prostate, kidney, bladder cancer, and testis cancer. I'm currently Associate Dean for Cancer Research. I'm a division chief here of the Division of Hematology Oncology at the UB, and a medical oncology director at Canada Health Cancer Care. And like Teresa, I've been involved in clinical trials for many years at different institutions. So we're here definitely to tell us our experience with clinical trials and learn from you. What's your question of interest? And try to learn a little bit more about what clinical research entails.
Kim, I see you next, or I see your name.
Hey, okay, sorry. Kim Breton, I'm from the research office, and kind of just here to answer any questions that may come up through the course of the panel discussion. Myself and Pam, which I'm sure Pam will introduce herself next, but see a lot of familiar faces, names. So, but yeah, if there's any questions, we're always available, but looking forward to the discussion today. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Pam. I'm also in the research office with Kim. And again, we were just here to help support or answer any questions that may come up. So glad to see everybody here.
Great, and I think that's it, unless it did, Kinja, did she, doesn't look like she is here, so I guess we'll get started. So before questions, I just wanted to kind of ask, and then I'll open it up to anyone that wants to talk specifically about something. But how would you define success in clinical research? Patient outcomes, efficiency, innovation? Like, how would you describe what that would look like?
Teresa, you go first.
Okay.
Because you've been very
So,
successful, so that's why.
so I don't know. So I think success is defined by the ability to, in my opinion, be involved in clinical trials, and some may at first glance not seem very perhaps innovative, but in reality they do change the landscape for the patients. And I think a success is then defined, of course, when people are more experienced, they participate even in the protocol creation and even being consulted on endpoints. But at the beginning of a career, that doesn't happen. So a sponsor, if the clinical trial is sponsored, will decide the endpoint. But is thinking, I think, successful attitude in clinical trials, and especially investigator initiated, is thinking of what the problems are of your patients and what is there that could be out of the box and maybe a little risky, but can make a difference in the overall landscape and care of these patients. It may not be something that is apparent to the eye or accepted by the scientific community right away. So the example in my case was when I decided to test Enbrel, which had been approved for rheumatoid arthritis. We're talking 20 plus years ago, to see if it could preserve insulin production in patients recently diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, the ones we call stage 3 nowadays. And that led to a lot of discussion and a lot of ups and downs, different opinions. Ultimately, it's been very innovative and has paved the way for testing other therapies with anti-TNF. It's also to be said that I considered myself very successful when we were one of the pioneer centers recruiting for inhaled insulin that was made by Pfizer. Yet Pfizer decided to completely stop that operation, and so you could say, well, was that successful or not successful? I think still it's successful. And I think in general, the clinical trial should investigator-initiated or pharma-initiated, sponsored, or foundation, we have that too, should answer a gap, a need, and moving the field somewhat, forward. Another example is long-acting growth hormone. We were involved in long-acting growth hormone, so given once a week for a long time. We tried 3 or 4 products. They were a total disaster. When we embarked in the one of the three products currently approved by FDA, people who were working with me for many, many years were like, not again. But again, in my mind, it was a success to try those other products because we were very well positioned when technology vastly improved and we could test something else.
Dr. Healy?
I
And then
think
Dr.
Susan maybe has a question.
Yes, yep.
So I am Sue Ann Sisto. I'm the chair of the Department of Rehabilitation Science, which includes faculty from physical and occupational therapies, PhD programs, and so forth. And one of the challenges we have is more fundamental. We cannot get participants for our studies. So we have many grants submitted for spinal cord injury, stroke, brain injury. These populations are really understudied, and we cannot, because we don't have a rehabilitation center within the UB system, we have a very difficult time recruiting these participants for these trials. And I'm sure recruitment is a big issue no matter what in clinical trials. It's always the stopgap. But it's particularly hard for these disability groups. We've tried to work with ECMC, but this is, limited by their enrollment as well. And it's just a very, very difficult challenge for us to complete our trials. Even some of the more sensitive issues where we have faculty looking at intimate partner violence, so connecting with communities and trying to connect, build trust within the communities so that those individuals could come forward has taken some time. And then with NIH blowing up and not really allowing us to address some of those issues, a lot of the faculty have had to pivot into different directions. So that's one issue, recruitment of subjects. The second issue is if we work with individual faculty with Jacobs, we would love to have some space there so we could do some testing down there and have it easier for subjects to participate in our studies, rather than having to come on South Campus, which seems to be onerous for several individuals. Well, I don't know whether it's parking or distance or what. So that's another obstacle for us being on South Campus. So I'll stop there and let others chime in.
This is Kim, I'm going to chime in there for a minute just on your second point, Swan, is the CRC, our clinical research unit, we are positioned that we may be able to help you with those visits off South Campus. And we'd be happy to meet with you to look over the area and the rooms that we have available and, just see what we can do to help accommodate that.
Thank you, Kim.
Sue, I've used that facility and it might work well for you. Space limited essentially for PT, but there are avenues to work around in that space.
Okay, good to know. Not all of our equipment is mobile, so we can't always, like I run a gait analysis, 3D gait lab. I can't move all my equipment downtown. So, but there are some studies that have used some portable devices. And yes, thank you, Kim and Kyle, for mentioning that. And we'll try to coordinate space there.
Let me ask you, and I'll call upon Ashley, who is also in this meeting, who is a recruitment specialist. I recall, and this may be off base, at some point, Ashley and we offered to meet with investigators who are having issues with recruitment. At some point, I remember meeting with a faculty member, and maybe it was not in your department, but the procedures were very daunting, okay? And maybe I am wrong, but I guess my question is, from what I understand, your issue is you cannot access population with spinal cord injury or with post-traumatic brain syndrome or with whatever. So it's the access to the population.
Yes.
Have you, and not really a very difficult protocol, because that's part of what Ashley is always trying to bring home when she has a chance to meet with investigators when they're preparing their protocol. And have you had any connections with UBMD areas where these patients have been followed? For example, neurology or neurosurgery, ortho. Is that something you have already attempted, you and your faculty members, or not? And
Yes, I
also,
mean, just to apologize for interrupting, but yes,
no.
we have reached out to UBMD. We are working closely with the Letty Group on concussion. Has had a little trouble with getting children with concussion related TBI. You know, most of the concussions are related to the sports injuries. So there's a little challenge there. We've been also working with neurology, but to be honest with you, there are very few people who see spinal cord injury
Yes.
in the UB area. We
Mhm.
have gone to Rochester and almost as far as Syracuse with the VA there, which is the spinal cord VA there.
Do
So
you,
which is difficult.
yeah. Do you think that if a trial is not too complicated, do you think that we try not to use our connection in the community and rather actually ask them what they need? But it might be possible to go in settings like a community center or a place of worship, depending on the age, where people may have had that injury. Now, would people with spinal cord injury, would they be a purview of our neurosurgeon at UBMD? Who would
Um,
take care of
it,
these people?
I mean, they usually go to level one trauma centers initially upon
Okay.
injury, and
Yeah.
that's usually not in Buffalo. They'll go wherever they're injured. Um, if so then they go through rehab, and as I mentioned before, we don't really have rehab in UBMD.
Yeah.
We don't have rehab at all.
Okay.
So,
But what about rehab within ortho? Might they have some
yeah,
patients
so
there?
not neuro patients, but ortho patients. Yeah. Like if we've been I recently had a call with Lesbison,
Okay.
who were beginning to revive our relationship
Yeah.
with a low back pain and that kind of thing,
Yeah.
knee
Yeah.
osteoarthritis. But so that's a very rich database. Definitely not a problem there. What I'm talking about is those neurological conditions like brain injury, spinal cord injury, stroke. We seem to be
But
connected.
somebody, I mean, we have a very large stroke again at BGH and Buffalo General. I think the
Yes,
director just changed again.
right.
There must be a way to some conditions may be very difficult because of the lack of the rehab, but others should be
Yeah.
possible.
Yes, we do.
Oh,
We do collaborate with BGH for stroke and their support groups. So we've kind of reached out quite a bit. I guess I would just say certain populations either are harder to acquire, such as spinal cord injury, or when they do agree, there's really transportation challenges to come to South Campus. I don't know if there's any other solution to that other than, getting grants and
but
funding
right, but
transportation.
it
But
would be building, yeah, one of the suggestions that Ashley always puts forward is to be realistic in building reimbursement for transportation or a system, which of course is very complex. Some of these people may be in a wheelchair, whatever, but building in that part of it, because the human aspect of it, the difficulty in coming to a place and not being able to afford to hire somebody who brings you, it's the barrier number one that makes your field so difficult. I'll let Pam go ahead, and then maybe Ashley, if you have any word of wisdom, please go ahead.
Hi, sorry, just a couple of things. So, neurosurgery, they have the UB Neuroscience Center there on Worley. And they also have a full-on physical therapy. I think it's Buffalo Rehab that has an office there. And the Atlas Surgery Center is there. And I'm just wondering if, I'm not familiar with what grants or protocols. I mean, I'm aware of the one with VNS therapy, but I'm wondering if we could partner with the rehab group, really conduct the study there and access the referrals, through people that are coming in, recruit from that practice and from that therapy. And I transportation, of course, is also a big thing. I don't know if that would be a possibility. And really, I don't want to say do marketing, but just let people know that, these are the studies that we're conducting, because it's a busy place there.
It's very busy, very busy, very big. It's a great resource. We're working with some of the neurosurgeons there. So I appreciate you bringing up that suggestion or that point. And as you know, we're working with the Vivastim project with the neurosurgeons there.
But is there an opportunity to do more? Is there, are they open to it, or?
I think they're very collaborative and collegial. They're really a wonderful group. But they usually have to hire a fellow because they're in the operating room all the time. So we work with their fellows and in helping us recruit. I don't think they see many spinal cord, but that's another story. I don't want to dominate the conversation just on that.
So, one question, correct me if I'm wrong, but physical therapy is restricted from having clinical practice in an academic institution in New York State still? Is that
Yes.
correct? So that's one of the big differences, I think, between your department and many of our departments, is that you're not basically allowed to have a clinical practice affiliated with our institution, which may be one of the real limiting factors. And I hope that law can change at some point.
No, that has nothing to do with, we're not talking
No,
about
okay.
clinical practice. We're talking about research, research access to patients,
But
participants.
having access would become easier if you had a clinical practice on site or affiliated with us, I would imagine.
Well, we have many of our faculty who work in clinical practices, so they help us out quite a bit in that way. There's still not that many spinal cord, but that's another issue.
This is Mary from the Department of Orthopedics. We have a spine surgeon over at ECMC, and he covers trauma call. I know, like you say, the cases probably aren't that many, but ECMC is a trauma unit for quite a large area around here. So I'm sure some stuff does come through ECMC.
I'm sorry. Yes, they do. They do. It fluctuates, as you might imagine. And lengths of stay, are very short. So trying to capture them at that time, Mary, but if you have any suggestions of who,
I can talk to Joey Kowalski. He's the spine surgeon over there.
okay.
And I
Thank
do
you.
run into him. I mean, because we work in the same department, but I can ask him if he, give me an idea how much spinal cord injury comes through ECMC. I'm actually going to be with one of the trauma surgeons this afternoon in lab, Dr. Dyskin. So I can actually ask Evgeny too, because he's also a trauma doctor, and just to get some idea.
Okay.
The other thing too is the the new building 716 Health. As you know from working with concussion, they have PT there. And there's also an office in Orchard Park, right off 20A. There's a PT facility there too.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we send our students to hundreds of PT facilities.
Okay.
So yeah, thank you. I know most of these
Okay, but
locally.
I'll talk to the trauma doctors and see if I can find anything out.
Thank you, Mary.
The other thing I'm going to say, Swan, is that I don't know if you or how familiar you are with the One Epic project, where we're coalescing all of the EMR systems from UBMD, ECMC, Collida, which includes GPPC, and UBMD, ECMC. So, but what that will also do is we can push a protocol there, and this goes for everybody else on the call as well. So we can push a protocol out and have it available to providers to say, this patient meets base criteria for this study. You may want to talk to them about it. Here's who they need to contact. And then the other part of that is there is a module of it that can go out to what they call MyChart, which is basically the patient portal.
Right.
And it notifies them one-on-one. There's a study that you may be interested in that you know, and here's who you call if you're interested in it. So there's some upcoming things that are kind of exciting in the world of recruitment that may help.
That's excellent. That's excellent.
No,
Thank you.
I want to say that Kyle's idea of using the Buffalo Research Registry, which you can contact Ashley or me, and we work very closely with the people who runs that, is also a shot. My other idea was to establish a contact with the people who do the rehab. For example, I have received PT at Sport Focus, which happens to have a place downtown, place, I think in Orchard Park, whatever.
Yes.
I see all people coming in, and some of the people are severely compromised. Maybe they have sustained that kind of injury. So that might be another, possibility to see what are the busiest rehab places. And then maybe chiropractors, because primary care physicians are very busy. Unless you have a connection, you may spend a lot of time and not have a return on your investment. So
Yeah,
Ashley?
we've had
Sorry.
some challenges. Oh, Ashley, go ahead.
Yeah, hi, Dr. Sisto. I was just going to say that I can follow up with you. Maybe we can have a consult offline to kind of talk about, it sounds like you've done your due diligence on a lot of different areas, but maybe kind of go over more in detail about what's, worked for some of the studies, what isn't working, and kind of go from there and just, take a more detailed look at things if that's something you'd be interested in.
I would, thank you. I also do use the Buffalo Registry for all of our trials, and we get great return in certain types of groups and very low return in other types of studies. Harder to find certain, kids with brain injury or something like that.
And it might also work to, I don't know if you use social media at all. You do?
Yes, we do.
Okay, good.
Does anyone have any other input around patient recruitment and retention or successes around that before we move on?
This is Roberto Bill again. I think just to go back on the first question about how do you define success for clinical trials? And I think Teresa alluded several key for success, but for people, again, I don't know who is actually participating to this Zoom call, but what's the level of People are doing already clinical trials. People want to learn about clinical trial. People maybe never done clinical trials. So, but as Teresa mentioned, of course, when we think about clinical research, is really whether or not are we able to address specific questions that will have impact on our patients. And of course, there's assess whether or not the clinical trial will address that question. But we're talking about patients, and of course, the first question we have, I mean, let's say we have a great idea about a new drug, so we want to bring a new drug here for treatment of any type of disease, whether we have the patient population. And sometimes it's not easy to have a clear understanding how many patients actually are in our catchment area that are eligible for the specific studies. And there might be some study with very strict eligibility criteria where the number of patients might be very limited. Some studies that have very broad eligibility criteria. So, and of course, the success is to bring studies that have actually the broader eligibility criteria. But then what Sue-Ann also was alluded to, and I think Kim also, I would address in the right question, do we have enough patients? And do we have access to those patients? How we can make those patients aware? And I think we already touched upon on this. And for example, for us, just give you an example, we have a couple of studies actually on how diet can impact cancer patient outcome. And we have a hard time to actually make sure that the patient here in Buffalo, they know about these studies. I'm not a social media person. Unfortunately, my nutritionist is helping me a little bit more on that, but visibility about these clinical trials is a key. So I think definitely the CRO and the UB can help us to have that type of impact, making flyers that are be approved, of course. But that will increase access to those patients. But this is key, especially if you're not a large place where patients are just coming to you no matter what, but we're not
Right.
the double place.
Yeah.
I'm going to piggyback off of what Roberto just said and just let everybody know that the last week or so, the CRO now actually has a Facebook page where we can highlight different studies. So if you've got content that is IRB approved for social media, please let me know and we can get it out onto our site.
Terrific. Thank you, Kim, for sharing this.
The other thing that really helps is if you can pay participants. That's where we're really getting a lot of traction when we have grants that allow for that payment process. We get we get a lot of people coming in, more than we can keep up with. But again, you have to have that grant funding for that particular study to pay for transportation and also just paying subjects for their time.
The paid advertisements on Facebook also work a lot better than a post. We used it for one that I worked up with one of Sue's people on, but one of our clinical trials, we used the paid ones, and they better reach and better outcomes, put it that way.
Anything more on patient recruitment or retention before we move on?
But you're talking about patient retention, of course, is really those patients, perhaps, I don't know, you mean patients that are on the clinical trials and that we're able to maintain those patients on the clinical trial. I think that is a very important issue. It depends on the study, it depends on the patient population. And it really is, we call it dropout rate. on these studies that is always accounted for because whenever we do a simple sign calculation, right, there is we always need to include this potential dropout rate. The challenge sometimes we don't estimate rightly this dropout rate, and then but we can anticipate if a patient is required to come here very often, they is asked to do a lot of things beside the standard of care. Those, of course, will have a major impact. Cancer patient, of course, is a probably different patient population. They are very resilient, as you know, you can imagine. So that type of concern is less. But for other type of studies where frequency of the visit may be becoming a very burden, again, that's is something that you always need to consider when you design a clinical trial.
Mhm. Thank you. Anyone? So the next topic is around operational and regulatory challenges. First of all, if anyone has any questions regarding operational or regulatory questions, or I would just ask our panel what the biggest operational or regulatory hurdles have you faced and how do you address it?
With great patience. Not the clinical patients, but with great patients, because I mean, Pam knows we're working on this clinical trial, which is very, the money is very minimal, and it's just looping around legal, looping around the sponsors legal, and it still is not final. So having patience, I guess, would be all we could ask for.
Yeah, I think Sue is touching on something that is that we all found ourselves in that situation. So there are some trials, whether they're investigator initiated or pharma sponsored, where it's going to be a small number of patients, for example. So consequently, there may not be a large amount of dollars. And my wonderful and capable research colleagues, research coordinators, colleagues that we have always remind us of that. Well, are we gonna be able to recruit in this? And so because there's so much work, and the work, for quite frankly, it's a lot of work that Roseanne Johnson and Kim and Pam and us in the diabetes endocrine team have to put forward. I think it requires patience, but also determination, because the people who are not expert in the field may not understand the importance of a certain clinical trials, where it may be difficult to make a good profit, or to regulatory and the quite frankly, we are much better. Okay, once upon a time, I ran everything and now we have the CRO help, and I have a team, in place and so forth. But sometimes a big hurdle is the non-disclosure agreement. That's the first thing. Now, we've made some strides there too, because we have some master agreements, so that helps in some cases. But it can be difficult, and there can be also legal ramifications. I can just imagine, well, if something happened at South Campus, what are you going to do, right? Or, things of that kind. So I would say that the biggest challenges is go through all the different steps. The IRB has gotten much better. Central IRB can be very helpful in certain trials, but it's a long process. And one thing that we've been trying to work on, and we haven't made a stride forward, and I know that Pam and Roseanne and Kim and are in our corners, is like you said, and Ashley has stressed in the notes that she prepared for me, reimbursing participants so that they're not losing their shirt with gas, missing work, and so forth is important. You cannot bribe them, but it's important. And yet, we have this cumbersome problem. I will be very transparent with all of you with the gift cards. I mean, it's a very, very difficult thing. And it pains me when a young investigator the other day, she said, I hang in there, but if I have to do another project like this and go through what I've gone through with these gift cards, I'm not doing it. I'm not doing clinical research. And, you know, it was months that because maybe she didn't know who to reach out. So I think for anybody on the call and people who you work with, don't be afraid to ask questions. Maybe I don't have the answer, but maybe I can find, you know, I can say Ashley or Pam or Kim or Roseanne, they have the answer. Somebody, you know, can facilitate things. So I see the regulatory, you know, the pre-award, if you want, technically. And then, you know, post-award, I couldn't agree more. We made a point with our mentees in pediatrics, Kara Kelly and I, that you have to be on top of things. You have to read very carefully what you're signing. You have to be available to your coordinator. It's a very serious matter that can end up not in a positive way if somebody is not available, you know, even if it's a low risk trial.
I have a question for the panel. We are in the process of starting a big study right now, and I agree with all your comments. I'm dealing with this right now. But I also have a CRO, clinical research organization. They've not been helpful. I got a stack of emails. I never got answers to my questions. They haven't provided me with much, and it's very frustrating. Some of the documents I have a document tracking sheet now. I've sent them 3 and 4 times. How do you deal with this kind of thing?
I can answer now, let the other chime in. In my operation, at all levels, clinical, research, administrative, I've always had a bottom-up approach, okay? But in this case, it becomes top-down. The PI gets on the phone, gets on the email, and calls the people in charge, not on the CRO, but on the sponsor side, and tells them enough is enough, what is going on, because we've had a lot of difficulties ourselves with that. And at the point where Roseanne Johnson has tried her best to explain, you need to reimburse for this, and they don't get back, and they don't answer, and they ignore, then somebody has to step in. Because unfortunately that's the reality, and some CROs are just not very professional.
I would totally agree with that. That's what we find as well. Personally, in my experience, that's exactly what I have done. I'll go back and forth, and it's like, okay, this is now the 3rd time I have sent you that, and now we are escalating. And I am not sending it again, but I am going to, you know, I'll basically send that email to the person, as Teresa was saying above, and attach all of those ones that I have sent. And it's like, I am not doing this again. You need to get them under control. And I usually get some sort of response from that.
Yeah, in general, for oncology clinical trials, we don't have these type of challenges. I mean, it's the opposite actually. The CRO, and they tend to be very detail oriented. So we don't have the bar for research in cancer is pretty high, so we don't encounter that. I think operationally, you mentioned about what's the operational challenge. Of course, operational is really the resource that we have. And as
Right.
you know, here at UB, the clinical research is, in terms of operational, is kind of fragmented. I mean, we are fortunate to have the CRO in place that help us from the regulatory point of view. But in terms of a research coordinator, each group are pretty much independent and need to figure out how to sustain themselves. So for oncology, we are lucky to partner with Kaleida, who's actually supporting our research coordinator and research manager. So we found that. But that is the challenge. Is really, again, clinical research is not a moneymaker operation, right? We know that, and I think everybody should be aware about that. But it's something that is required. But let me tell you, and just 30 seconds comment, it's not a luxury. For cancer care, I don't know if you're familiar, there is this Committee on Cancer Accreditation. So all the major cancer centers, all the major hospitals needs to go through that accreditation. And Kaleida went through, ECMC went through. And one of the requirements is actually to have patient on clinical studies. Is a requirement, is a quality requirement. And for us, actually 6% because we're part of the network. So again, clinical research is not just something that, you have it or you don't have it. It is really part of the excellence of care. And that's why it's important for us to have a clinical trial operation that allow us to guarantee that minimum of clinical trial accrual. So clinical studies accrual.
Does anybody else have anything to add or any questions? No? So I guess the next question would be around our leveraging our CRO office. And so I guess we could take this time to either, if you have any questions for the CRO office, or if the panel wants to discuss how they have used the CRO office for trial quality, efficiency, or impact.
I think personally, I used to have to do all the budget and negotiations myself. And all of the regulatory myself with one coordinator that I had. Even when I did double-blind studies, investigator initiated. And the drug accountability was very hard. For example, with the Enbrel, we were very fortunate that we were operating at a time where our children's hospital had a awesome pharmacist who actually dispensed in a blind fashion at the time. They didn't even have pens. They were syringes. But the pharmacy, the negotiation, the trouble with, sponsors, obviously, nobody's perfect on the side of the investigator, on the side of the CRO, but there is plenty of help there and plenty and prompt response. So, and with the IRB, that's another also aspect because we talked about hurdles. There are wonderful people. One of them actually works directly with Ashley and us in our CTSI who do the pre-review. But sometimes there are also some things that need to be clarified, in via voice, not via trail of emails. So picking up the phone, calling Kim if there is a problem, or picking up the phone and calling, people at the IRB is the way to go, but trying to leverage, if one just says, oh, well, I didn't have support, this and that, I say, well, then I would like to know the specific instance so that since, we all have problems, we have problems in our clinical operation all the time, right? If you don't know that a patient couldn't access the appointment in endo, how are you going to remedy? And the same thing is with these studies, and each study is a little different. So, I think reaching out, and if there is a misunderstanding of an issue, then you talk. You don't just send thousands of emails back and forth to try to solve a situation that in all likelihood is not going to be solved that way.
My 2 cents comment, I mean, I think we're very appreciative of our CRO. I mean, I think Pam and Kim and Sanjay, I mean, they really build a very solid infrastructure. They should have more resources, but we all agree upon. And so, but we're fortunate to have them. I think the space that we have here in the CDRC is a beautiful space, and we don't utilize it enough. I utilize it for my diet studies to some extent, but definitely we need to increase awareness about this capability. And as I know that the mandate from the Dean's office is really to increase our clinical trials and clinical trial operation, as we're going to bring hopefully more clinical trials, more resources. We'll have even more FTEs that dedicated to the CRO, because I think they definitely need it. Yes, Suan.
I was going to ask another question, so I don't want to change directions unless other people want to talk about this topic.
Go for it.
Okay. One of the questions I have for the group is, when you're starting an industry trial and the agreement that we must sign, do you have a way to ensure that the publication of our findings can be free to submit according to our timeline and with our own scientific independence? Or do you find they're very restrictive about the publishing?
It depends. My answer is depends really whether or not you are the PI, the national PI of the
Yes.
studies. I mean, I think if you are the national PI of the study, definitely you have a much more leverage. If you are site PI, among many others, of course, you need to just follow. But in general, pharmaceutical company tend to have their own agenda in terms of publication, when to publish the data, how to publish the data. At least this is my experience in cancer-related clinical trials. But if you are a national PI at your institution, definitely have a much more leverage.
Yeah.
If you are just site PI, you just go with the flow.
Yeah, some companies, non-investigator initiated trials, they will take in account the recruitment that has happened and include other people. But I agree with Roberto, a lot depends on the person who is put on point. Like when we did the Simponi, the golimumab in type 1 diabetes, I was the point person, and myself and another person kind of decided who would be on the publications together with the pharma company. Now, it's a little different, and I was there very close only one time in my experience, where a pharma may give you have an idea, okay, to experiment something for spinal cord injury. They say, oh, you know what, Dr. Sisto, this is a great idea. Let's do the study. You design the protocol and everything. In that contract, the PI has to be very careful stipulating that there is independence and be able. Now, this is a regular standard practice now, and it came from investigators many, many years ago, I want to say 40 years ago, who tested Synthroid versus levothyroxine. And the producer of Synthroid tried to prevent them from showing that it was the exact same thing with the generic. And that became sort of a national case study for independence. But whatever we sign in the contract is binding. That's why it's really important. I mean, we are not attorneys. We're the clinical experts, if you want, but then you do have to rely. And I do question things and say, what does this mean? What does this mean? There has been another hurdle has been relative to some trials that have less money because they are sponsored by foundation on reimbursement for injury. So that can take a lot of effort to get it moving forward, but you need to really know what was signed.
For sure.
And as far as the industry part of things, if you've got those and you are, as Roberta said, a site PI, it doesn't preclude you from writing something up, but it does preclude you from publishing without them knowing about it. So usually you have to get their approval before you can go forward and seek any kind of publication on, just independent thought at that point in time.
Yeah, one thing, whether you are the sponsor, I mean, investigating initial trial, you are the sponsor, okay?
Yeah.
So you own sometimes the IND and you are supported by pharma. And in general, you can do this also with some cooperative group, right? But if the sponsor is the pharmaceutical company on the side.
Yeah.
And unfortunately,
And sometimes they
cancer care-
drag their heels.
Oh, yeah.
They just,
Oh, yeah.
it's done. All the sites have recruited, we're finished, and we wrote it up. We're just waiting for approval, and then it can take a very long time. It's quite frustrating. I do have to leave for another meeting. Thank you so much for allowing me to chat with all of you.
So do I. I think everybody is going on.
Yeah,
at this point.
we're just about done. It's 1:00, but thank you so much to the panel today for this discussion, and hopefully we'll have some more regarding clinical trials. Take care, everyone.